This year's a very exciting year, this summer, especially for me and for all the Native people of North America, because in October, it's going to be the canonization of the first Native American woman. Blessed Kateri Tekakwitha has been declared, but officially will be declared a saint. Now, she has a great story in that when she was a little girl, her village suffered from a smallpox epidemic, which sadly killed her father, who was the chief of the tribe, and her mother and her brother. And she, who also suffered smallpox, was left with deep scars and with very poor eyesight because of the smallpox, but she survived. And then she ended up growing up with her uncle, who became the chief of the Mohawk village, and her aunt and her cousins. Of course, those villages were very, very close-knit family. Now, her mother had been an Algonquin woman who had been captured by the Mohawks, and this was common. They would attack a village and capture the women and bring her, and then the chief married this woman who was Kateri's mother. But her mother had been baptized as a Christian, and somehow Kateri remembered her early days with her mother and how her mother would talk about Jesus and her faith. And so Kateri always grew up with this idea that she wanted to be a Christian, that she wanted to be baptized. It turns out that she was not baptized until she was 18 years old, because she was growing up in a Mohawk village. The Mohawk people were very suspicious of the Europeans who had brought the smallpox, and then especially these European Jesuits who had a different faith, a different religion, who spoke a different language. Still, there was no animosity. The Jesuits were welcomed, and Kateri had a relationship with a Jesuit priest who was living in the Mohawk village. This was around northern New York State, around the Albany area, actually a place called Orioles-ville, New York, today. And as Kateri grew older and older, she really felt this calling, this desire to not just be a Christian, but it's interesting because not knowing very much about the religion, this calling to a consecrated life, essentially, to the point that she was basically persecuted by her own people because she was criticized, she was mocked, children would throw stones at her. Now, her eyesight was very poor because of the smallpox. And they say that the name Tekakwitha actually means she who bumps into things, because she couldn't see very well. She was urged to be married, which was a common thing for a teenager, a Mohawk teenager. And Kateri was pretty sure that she did not want to be married. She wanted to be married to Christ. Again, not understanding very much, I think, of Catholicism or Christianity. To the point that she had to leave her village because she was going to be married. And she escaped and traveled about 100 kilometers north to the only Christian Mohawk village in a place called Akwesasne, which is just north of the St. Lawrence in what is present-day Quebec. And so that's where Kateri arrived when she was about 18 years old. She was baptized, and she lived there among other Christian Mohawk, and very quickly she became revered as someone who was holy. She was different. There was something different about her. She would fast. She would spend time caring for the poor. She would stay up all night praying, to the point that the priest, in fact, at one point told her to stop doing that, to start taking care of herself. She died when she was 24 years old. And because she was considered set apart already, and she had consecrated herself to Christ, there were a lot of people gathered at her bedside when she died, and the first miracle, in fact, happened at her bedside. She died, and immediately her scarred complexion was cleared, and that was recorded by the Jesuit priest as this miracle. And in fact, about 60 years later, there was another Jesuit priest who spoke about her, who wrote about her, and who accounted maybe about 100 different miracles that were considered to be the miracle that led to her beatification 300 years later, and then now almost 350 years later, she's going to be canonized because of a wonderful miracle that took place in Washington State with a little boy, Jake Finkbonner, who suffered from a flesh-eating disease on his face. Somebody came with a relic of Blessed Kateri, prayed with Jake, placed the relic on his chest, and the doctors say that infection stopped immediately. That was the day that the infection stopped. And that was the miracle that was considered to be the miracle that was investigated that has led to her official canonization. Now, this story is meaningful to me because 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing the exercises of St. Ignatius, and there's one of the visualizations that you do about your community of saints. And this was even before World Youth Day, before I even knew much about Blessed Kateri. But I remember, because I wrote it down, that in my community of saints, and they were all, my favorite saints, St. Ignatius, St. Francis, and I wrote down that Kateri Tekakwitha was in that group. And I read that recently, and I thought, I didn't know much about this woman, but 7 years later, she was there, and now it's very interesting that my life has brought me to this point, because as a producer with Salt and Light Television, we are making a documentary on the life of Blessed Kateri to tell her story, a story that shows how God calls you even before you're born, even before you even know what your calling is, sometimes even before you know what your relationship to God is. And we can use fancy words like vocation, but really, that desire, that calling that is in your heart that draws you towards who you really are being created to be, was something that was very apparent in Blessed Kateri's life. And if you look at the story of this little boy, Jake Finkbonner, for example, same. He was 6 years old, and already God had a plan for his life, for his family life, a plan that is full of hope. And I love that, because that's what Salt and Light Television is all about. It's about giving people hope. And as a deacon, that's really what I hope that my ministry is about. It's about giving people hope. And really, isn't that what sainthood is about? It's about giving people hope and bringing them closer to Christ and to God, so that we can all be saints in heaven with him one day.